Hi, in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at emacs Tramp not working properly with doas and the zsh shell. So if I come across to another buffer here, what I'm going to do is switch to root and run Control X, Control F, and then doas : and a file path here. Okay, so I'm just going to come back into this temp directory and you'll see the file I just created, this test file, and you'll see that it is actually owned by root. So what I'm going to do is actually show you the fix for getting the zsh shell to work properly with doas and Tramp on emacs. And the issue is, typically what happens is you'll run doas, it will prompt you for your password inside emacs. You put the password in, press return, and it will just hang and nothing will happen. So there's a couple of bits to this. If I come across to my zshrc file, what we have is this section up here where we set the term to be dumb and we unset some ZLE options for ZSH and reset our PS1. But even doing this didn't fix the issue for me. I'll still get the issue with the prompts hanging and not accepting the password. So what I found is what you need to do is actually change the shell inside of emacs to use something other than ZSH. This isn't going to cause any issues. So what I'm going to do is actually, it's not going to affect anything outside emacs and it's not going to cause any issues within emacs changing the shell. So what I'm going to do is if you run metax get env, this is going to actually print out the environmental variables that you've got set. If I come across here, is it env, get what the env is it? Yeah, so if I run env in the terminal and let me grep that out, grep shell, what you'll see here is the shell is set to ZSH, okay? But now when I'm inside of Emacs and I run get env, it's listing the shell as user bin bash. And that is because I have added this little line of code here, set env shell user bin bash. And what this does is this basically fixes the issue completely. And the reason why I'm setting this to bin bash, user bin bash, is because on most Linux systems these days, bin sh is actually a symbolic link to another shell. On Ubuntu, I think it's the dash shell, but on Fedora, it's actually a symbolic link to bash. So if you run which sh, you'll see it's user bin sh, user bin sh. Yeah, you can see that's a symbolic link to bash. Same deal with bin sh. It's actually a symbolic link to bash, which is that user bin bash. So there's no point in putting in bin sh or user bin sh because it's just going to be a symbolic link to bash, at least on Fedora. As I said, on Ubuntu and maybe Debian-based systems, it may be dash. So that's the first thing. We set environment, shell, user bin bash. Next thing we do is customize set variable Tramp default user root. So it's going to use root. And the third option we want here is set q Tramp allow unsafe temporary files t. And that's because what you'll typically get is when you're using doas or sudo, sometimes you'll get this little prompt come up saying, do you want to allow temporary unsafe files, yes or no? Just set that to T to suppress that error message. And once you've done that, you're good to go. So you may need this section up here, even though we're using a bash inside Emacs. This little bit of code is actually useful for if you're connecting to another machine over SSH. So what I'll do now is show you my doas config. That's etc doas.conf. And by default, at least on Fedora, I think the permit wheel thing's added by default. I may be wrong. But we've got a couple of sections down here. We've got allow user, so permit, keep environment, set environment path, and then my username. And what that does is that makes items in my path available when I'm using doas. Next one we've got is allow root to switch to our user, and this is something I use in some scripts that I've written for a split VPN connection, so that what this allows you to do is run a command as root, but then drop down. You can run a command as root, but then it kind of drops down to your user. And this is especially useful if you're using graphical applications which you don't want to ever run as root. You can, for example, you can put a graphical application into a different namespace, and that requires root privileges. But then when you're kind of running it, you drop down to your user, so it's not running the application as root. What we've got down here is a couple of commands for butterfs, commands for DNF, and these are just some scripts that I have. Ossery, which is a script I use to mount an encrypted Lux container. We've got some VPN scripts and a namespace script that puts different applications into a different network namespace. And then finally, at the end, what you want is root as root. Permit no path, keep environment, set environment, path root as root. So this is my doas config, as well as my zsh configure that I showed you. So this setup, in combination with these couple of lines here, setting the shell, setting the Tramp default user, and Tramp allow unsafe temporary files, actually fixes all the issues with doas. And the other nice thing is that you can have persistence. So what I do, if I, for example, I can say touch test, and suppose this test file was owned by root, doas rm test. Actually, I'll create another one. db test 2. Okay. Doas rm test. So it's prompting me for my password, and then I've got to run doas rm test 2 again. So you can see here I'm prompted for my password each time. If I switch to doas temp test 1, some text, do the same thing again, temp test 2. You can see I'm not being prompted for my password each time I use the doas command. Basically, it is unlike on the command line. Okay, so if I come to so you can see here I'm actually running as doas root at in my machine name here, and I'm running diode as root. So you can see here these test 1, and test 2 are all owned by root. So I can actually come through here and delete those. Whereas, hang on, touch temp test. Okay, so you can see here, I'm just running Diode as my regular user here, and this file is owned by root. So if I try to delete that, not permitted, okay? Undo that. So doas :temp gr refresh, and you can see I can now mark this and delete this. So that's how you can get doas working with the zsh shell, and basically the long and short of it is you change the shell inside of emacs. So as I said, if I run env grep shell, you'll see that it's actually set to user bin and zsh, but inside of emacs get env, you can see it's actually been set to user bin bash. You can see the term down here is set to dumb, so that may be another thing that helps. I'm not sure if it's actually using that or not, or just the regular bash shell default prompt. So that's how you can fix the issue. It's something that's kind of really annoying. There is actually a section in the Tramp.el file for doas. So emacs Tramp GitHub. Usually what I do is I search the mirrors. There was a section in here, I think it was I'm sure there's a section in here that actually has the doas bit of code. I'm not sure if this was the one I was actually looking at. Is it in Lisp? Yeah, I think it's in Lisp. Yeah, that's right. In one of these files, there's actually a section for doas. Let's see if I can actually remember which one it is. Just so you can actually see what the default option is. Doas. No, there's another section, message or clone sh or sudo edit. I'll give up in a second. Yeah, no, there we go. I picked the right one. Okay, that's tramp-sh.el. I'll zoom that in a bit. What you'll see here is add to list, Tramp methods, doas, Tramp login program, doas. And this is the important bit here. Tramp login arguments -u s. So this is the user, and the s is actually going to pull the shell type either from etc password or from the shell variable. So man doas, let me just check what the thing was. It's -u and -s. Okay, so the one we're interested in here is -s, execute the shell from shell or etc password. So what happens is the implementation of doas with Tramp in Emacs has got some default options, and the -s option is basically going to use whatever shell that you've got specified in etc password or set in your shell variable basically. And if I run echo shell, you'll see that's user bin zsh. So that's why by default it's going to use your zsh shell for Tramp. And the issue, as I said, is basically what happens is you'll enter your password and press return, and it will just hang. Nothing will happen. So as I said, the way we get around that is by setting the shell to something else inside of Emacs, and as I said, setting the shell to bash as opposed to zsh isn't going to cause any problems. It's not going to having your shell set to zsh inside of Emacs doesn't really offer any advantages over just using bash, because we're just using it for the prompt. So that's how you can fix the issue. A couple of lines of code, and it should be all good. Of course, you need to install doas. On Linux, it's actually using a port of the OpenBSD doas implementation, and it's called OpenDoas. And another important thing to bear in mind is how you check the syntax is actually correct in your doas configuration file, and you do that with doas-C, etc. doas.conf. And as you can see, there's nothing being printed out there, and that means there's no errors and the syntax is correct. You've got to be careful with these doas configuration files. Sometimes a bit of extra white space or something like that can sort of break it. And also the order of the configuration is also important. Later items in the configuration override previous items, as it were. So that's all for now. I'll put links to all this under the video, and hope that helps you get Tramp, doas, and zsh working with Emacs.